Well, hello everyone. It is time for lesson number 8 in our kids' classes this quarter.
Well, it's hard to believe. Lesson number 8 already.
I know.
Wow.
So, Mr. Joe, this lesson is really the fulfillment of what the kids have been talking about in their memory verse.
Yes.
They've been reciting and learning Joshua chapter 21 verses 43 and 45 that says that God gave to the people of Israel, I'm just paraphrasing it, but God gave to the Israelites all of the land that he promised, and that everything he said has come to pass. And what we see now is that God truly has given them all of the land. That's what today's lesson is about.
As we get into this lesson today, we're finishing up the book of Joshua, really. We come all the way to the end of the book of Joshua, and even the death of Joshua, as we come to the end there. And
he dies?
I was supposed to say that yet? Oh, no, I ruined the story.
Thought he was going to live forever.
No, afraid not. But you're right. As we've gone through the whole book of Joshua, just as God said, the land has been conquered, it's divided into all of these tribes, to 12 tribes, and we've done some map work on that, before, looking at the 12 tribes, where they were and all. Well, this was God's plan.
That's right. And as we've been saying in each of the lessons that we've talked about this quarter, when we are soldiers in the Lord's army, it is important that we obey everything the Lord says. How many times have we said that in these stories that we've gone through this quarter? And this lesson is no different.
How many times did God say that to the children of Israel?
That's right.
And through Moses and through Joshua, who continued to tell the children of Israel, listen, you have to obey what God says. I don't think we can emphasize it too much.
Yeah, I agree. So, Joshua leads the armies of Israel into the promised land, and God is helping them, and they are conquering all of this land. And so once they have finished with the majority of that work, there were still some of the Canaanites that remained in the land, right? We mentioned that in an earlier lesson. They didn't drive out everybody, although that's what they were supposed to do.
Oh, that's going to cause them problems.
That's right. But they did drive out most of the Canaanites, and now it's time for them to move in. It's time for them to take the land. And so they have to divide up this land and separate it and put the different tribes in each of their respective locations. And that's part of what we're talking about in this lesson. But what's really going to be emphasized in all of this, especially as we start to make our way into the book of Judges, which is where we're going next, every person in the land of Israel needed to make the choice to be obedient to the Lord.
That's not any different than the way it is today, Mr. Ben. We all have to make our own choice, whether we obey the Lord or not. It's one of those things where Mom and Daddy can't choose for us. Our brothers and sisters, our friends can't choose for us to obey the Lord. And that's much what the lesson is about. I mean, that was the same issues they were dealing with long ago.
And when we're young, like many of our viewers are, Mr. Joe, well, sure, Mommy and Daddy do tell us what to do, and we have to obey Mommy and Daddy, and we are learning from them as they're teaching us. But what we're saying, kids, is as we get older, we take on more responsibility, and it's important that you and I and Mr. Joe, it's important that all of us make a choice to serve the Lord.
Absolutely. That's right. Well, we have to think about this dividing of the land. The fact that, God had a big part about how the land was to be divided.
That's right. That's right. So we need, before we go to the map, we need to mention, who is the high priest again here?
Well,
there's been a change, right?
You want to say Aaron.
Yeah, no, he was the first one.
Yes, but see now, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so there's a different high priest, and really, he's just kind of in our story for a short time tonight, but I think we should introduce him. His name is Eliezer.
Eliezer, that's right. And we only want to mention him, first because he was the high priest, but also because he was helpful to Joshua. He was instrumental he and Joshua worked together to bring about the division of the land. So we've got a map here that we want you to see, and this is a map that looks familiar to you.
Sure.
This is the promised land that God gave to the Israelites, and you can see the different colors on here that represent the different tribes that are these tribes of Israel in the lands that they took. But Mr. Joe, we need to talk about these tribes over here. There's a big long word for them. What is that word?
Well, you see, that is on the east side of the Jordan River.
The Jordan River.
Remember?
Right
We've
here.
talked about that before. And these three tribes, well, these two tribes and half a tribe of Manasseh, they were the first ones that settled. You remember, that was quite a while back before they came in to conquer the land. And now there's 9.5 tribes that have settled over here on this side. And so
I'm going to move this over here
okay,
so it's a little bit easier for us.
And that way I don't look like I'm slapping you in the face.
Right.
And so these tribes over here it was called an area of the Transjordan is what it was called.
That's the word. Transjordan. And when you hear that word, the Transjordan, we're only talking about these three tribes here on the east side of the Jordan River. That's what that word means.
A good question would be, what are the tribes in the Transjordan?
That's a good question. Maybe we should remember that for our Wednesday night video.
You know,
maybe
if we can
we should remember that for our Wednesday night video.
If we don't remember it, maybe somebody else will and remind us.
All right, very good.
Well, you know, there's something else here about these tribes, a couple of things. Okay, so we said there's 2.5 tribes over on that side, the east side. There's 9.5 tribes over here.
9.5.
Yeah, that's right.
9.5.
And so that equals 12. Makes for 12 tribes. But you know what?
Real good at math.
Yeah, that's right. But you know, when you look at that map, do you see the tribe of Levi anywhere?
Oh, let me look.
You see the tribe of Levi?
I don't see that one on the map.
Okay, well, here's another one. Now, you remember, these are the names of Jacob's sons, right?
Yeah.
Levi was one of the sons, but there's not a tribe of
Fred.
Levi.
Fred.
No, not Fred. There's no Fred. No.
Oh.
But what about Joseph?
Hey, he's not on here either.
See, Joseph is not on there.
Yeah.
So the tribe of Levi, well, there is no tribe of Levi. There's no tribe of Joseph, so there should only be 10. But
well, there is a tribe of Levi, but there's no land for the Levites.
Good point. That is right. That's right. And so the Levites don't have a land like the other tribes do.
Could we maybe say that these are almost like counties?
Yeah, well,
in our
states,
in our states, we have counties. We have Greenville County, we have Pickens County, and others. It might be kind of like that.
Might be. We might think of it that way.
But the Levites don't have one.
They don't have.
Well, that's
land
not fair.
area.
What happened?
Well, God had a different plan for them. Okay.
Oh.
And
okay.
I mean, just like Joseph, there's not a land area for Joseph, but on the other hand, there is.
That's right. I think I've heard about that before.
Because his sons.
Oh, that's right.
And what were his sons' names? Do you remember?
Frank and Perry?
No. See, he doesn't know. And see,
I think it was Ephraim and Manasseh.
Yes, that's right. Those were the sons of Joseph.
So Manasseh here, purple, and then Ephraim here in the orange. Those were Joseph's two sons, and they received the allotment of land that would have gone to Joseph.
And so that takes us back to 12 again, even though Levi, the tribe of Levi, does not have land. But it's not like they didn't get something.
What did they get then?
Okay, well, so now here's the thing. So the Levites were the priests, and the Levites were those spiritual leaders of the children of Israel, and they were needed everywhere. They were needed throughout the land.
Oh.
So God gave them cities.
Oh.
Now the question, of course, is going to be, how many cities did God give the Levites?
Well, this is a pretty big place, Mr. Joe. I would say it was at least 4 or 5.
Well, actually, it's quite a bit more than that, because they had to go from the top all the way to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
And so God established 48 cities of the Levites. And so you see, that way they were spread out sort of equally throughout all of the land. Because again, we have to think about what the Levites had to do.
This would be a really good thought question.
Mm-hmm.
if the Levites are the spiritual leaders of the nation,
Yes.
the priests, the ones who are offering sacrifices, the ones who are helping teach God's law,
Right.
isn't it wise that God would distribute them all throughout the land and not isolate them in one particular spot?
Exactly.
You see, Mr. Joe, I think that's a reflection of the wisdom of God.
Absolutely it is. You see, sometimes when we think about the priest and when we read about the priest in later years of the Bible, we read about them in Jerusalem. Like in the days of Jesus, we read about the priest so often it's in Jerusalem. And we might start to think that the priests are only in Jerusalem. But in the days of,
That's right. They were
Joshua,
all over the place.
And that's right.
They were everywhere.
Yes, they were. They were
Now,
throughout the land.
It wasn't just cities for Levites. Those were not the only special cities, right? There were also these cities that were called cities of refuge.
No,
that doesn't sound right.
No, it looks like that, but that's not it. Refuge.
Oh, right.
City of refuge.
And we went over that before
right.
the video.
That's right.
Refuge.
So what does that mean? A city of refuge.
And I think there were 6 of them, right?
Six
cities of refuge. What were those? Well, the cities of refuge, or safety, we might say is another word for refuge. Those were places where people could go if they had killed someone accidentally.
Right.
Now, that may seem kind of strange. How do you accidentally kill somebody? Well, I could think of a number of scenarios that could actually happen. Maybe it was a farming accident or something, and your ox stepped on somebody.
Right.
There's a number of things that could happen accidentally that take a person's life. Well, if that happened, you could flee to a city of refuge and wait in that city until your case could be decided fairly.
So the judge would be the one who would make some decision about if you were innocent or not. But when you were in the city of refuge, you were safe. No one could come in and harm you or kill you.
Yeah, that's right. And so if you were, if it was proven that you accidentally did this and you didn't mean to take a person's life, you didn't do it on purpose, but if you truly accidentally took the life of another, then you could live in that city of refuge and be protected.
That's right. That's exactly right. So let's review this for a moment now. We said, well, there are 12 tribes. And the Levites, the tribe of Levi, does not have a land, but they have cities.
48 of them.
48 cities. And then there's 6 cities.
Of
Refuge.
Safety.
Cities, that's right. And, I want to think about the Levites again for just a moment. You see, God gave special responsibilities to them. We've already seen that. I mean, when they crossed the Jordan River, remember it was the Levites carrying the ark
into the water.
Yeah. And the water separated, because not everyone could go to the ark and move it. In fact, they would die, remember?
Yes. And we'll learn a story one day
about
a man that happened to.
That's right. We have a story coming up about that. It was the responsibility of the Levites to do that. And then when the tabernacle, remember, it was the Levites who had responsibility to move the tabernacle and the furniture and the activities around it. See, the Levites had special responsibilities in the eyes of God. And perhaps that's why God did not grant them a land, but gave them the cities throughout the country so that they could be the spiritual leaders to all of Israel.
That's right. And we need to thank God for the spiritual leaders that we have in our lives today and the things that they do to help us. I know we all have spiritual leaders who have taught us and who have helped us be good people for the Lord, be good soldiers in His army. Yeah. All right, so now, Mr. Joe, the people of Israel have the promised land,
right?
And they've divided it up, as we see here on the map. But Joshua, he's getting older.
Well, we have to remember that from the time that they crossed over the Jordan River into the promised land until the conquering of the land and the dividing of the land, this did not happen in a day or two. I mean, it wasn't even a week or two, but it was years.
Years, that's right.
Yeah. And so as those years have gone on, well, just like all of us, we get older, and Joshua now, well, he's an old man. Yeah, he's an old man. And in fact, he called all of Israel together to Shechem. Remember, I think we looked at two mountains a couple of weeks ago that were real close. Shechem.
Shechem?
Shechem or Shechem. It depends who you talk to.
There we go. I'm familiar with that one.
Well, it depends who you talk to on how that's pronounced. But there was that city that was between the two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Yeah. And so Joshua takes the children of Israel there.
And he's going to talk to them.
Yes.
Just like Moses did before he died, before the Israelites went into the land of Canaan. Right.
But now, okay, this is the last speech for Joshua. Now, see, it was Joshua who took them there before, okay? You know, and before all the land was divided. It was after they conquered Ai, then they went up there and they had the memorial and they remembered God and they read the law. Well, now this is the last time, Mr. Ben. You see, because now, you know, his life is coming to an end. And so he gathered all the tribes there and they had this assembly before God. And Joshua reminded the people that everything they had, everything they could see, as far as they could see from the top of Mount Ebal, the top of Mount Gerizim, everything that they could see was given to them by God.
That's right. And he issues a challenge to them. In Joshua chapter 24, you can read about this speech. And he says those familiar words, you need to choose for yourselves today whom you will serve.
Yes.
And he says, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Yes.
You know, we probably have that on our refrigerator somewhere or maybe on a picture frame somewhere in our house. It was Joshua who spoke those familiar words and said to each person in Israel, you have to decide to obey the Lord.
And that is a passage so familiar to many of us. And for, you know, for the heads of the home who have responsibility in leading our children and bringing them up in the nurture of the Lord, you know, that is the attitude that we have to display. You know, in this house, we are going to serve the Lord. And that's what Joshua was saying to Israel at that time.
So now we come to the end of the book of Joshua. And Joshua ends with, of course, Joshua's death. As we said, he's an older man, and now it's time for him to die. So Joshua died, and then he was buried in his own land. And Joshua, such a good man he was. He was faithful to God. He was a strong leader for the people of Israel. And his influence lasted for a long time. The people who knew Joshua, they served the Lord for years to come. Unfortunately, though, as we come into the book of Judges, we're going to see that, well, that didn't last forever. But Joshua dies at the end of the book, one of Israel's greatest leaders. Now, we mentioned Joseph earlier. Joseph, who lived way back in the time of the latter chapters of Genesis and lived there in the land of Egypt. Mr. Joseph died in the land of Egypt, didn't he?
He did.
But he made a request.
He did.
Before his death.
And this is impressive to me.
Yeah.
That all of these years later, Joseph's request is remembered.
That's right. Before Joseph died, he said, don't leave my bones buried here in Egypt. Take my bones to the promised land that God has promised. And you know, when the Israelites left the land of Egypt, the book of Exodus tells us they had a box with Joseph's bones in it. And they carried that box all of this time. And now that they have come into the land, Joseph's bones come to this promised
That
land.
sounds so peculiar
It
to
does.
us, and you want to laugh. I'm not sure if it's really supposed to be funny or not, but to think about all the time that they carried the bones of Joseph for this time, that now they've conquered the land. Joseph's request was to be born in the land of his fathers, and now that's being done.
His request was remembered. And what's interesting about this too, Mr. Joe, is in the book of Hebrews, in chapter 11, it mentions Joseph's request about moving his bones. Interesting.
That's right.
It was a sign of Joseph's faith.
It was.
Now, finally, we need to go back to Eleazar, the high priest.
Right.
The one that we said was so helpful to Joshua in dividing up the land and serving God's people. When all of that was completed, Eleazar, well,
he was old too.
he died too. That's right. He got old just like Joshua and others. But God's people were now in their land. They were settled. The land was divided.
Yeah.
And now, as Joshua had said to each of them, it was time for them to make up their minds and choose to serve the Lord. I wonder what they were going to do.
Well, we will find out in
That's
lessons to come. But
That's
this
right.
leads us to a question, and we're going to close. You know, so much of this lesson has been to prompt us and to remind us that we have to obey God, and we have to choose for ourselves. No one can choose for us. And yet we will find that as we are growing up, that sometimes we will have friends who do not follow God, and maybe even discourage us from following God.
That's right.
And so one of the questions in our book, at least in the older children's books, is name 3 things that will help you follow God whether or not others do. And I want us to think about that.
Wow.
And so, like, you know,
I can think of a few things,
okay.
but I'm not going to say them.
Okay.
You said we'll let the kids think about it.
Well, on Wednesday night, let's try to remember, you might have to prompt us.
Let's try to remember to include the question.
Because sometimes we talk about this would be a good question, then we forget to ask the question. You know, you can help us that way.
That's
you
right.
know.
That's right. But let's say the question again, so we can keep it fresh in their memory.
Name 3 things that will help us follow God, whether others do or not.
You know, that'd be a great question, kids, to talk about with your mom and dad or with your grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Let them help you talk about that together, and then you can be prepared for Wednesday night's video when we do this and we ask this question.
You know, I think, like on Wednesday night, it would be kind of hard for someone to write in 3 things. If we ask this question and you can respond even with just one idea, I think that would be
that would be great. If we got one idea from 3 people, that would be 3 ideas.
That's right.
And that would answer the question.
That would be good.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Kids, keep thinking about this map, but especially keep working on your memory verses. Thank you very much.
See you later.